Hello, everyone. We are joined by a very special guest today, Laurel Farrer. Laurel is the president of Remote Work Association and is the CEO of Distribute Consulting. As a remote work strategist, Laurel has helped many organizations to start, strengthen, and leverage virtual workplaces. She has also collaborated with the world's top remote friendly companies to strengthen virtual communication, streamline digital processes, and develop long distance management strategies. I'm sure you would have read her articles on Forbes plenty of times. Welcome, Laurel. I'm so excited for a conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Great. Okay, so we're talking in the middle of a global pandemic, and in the wake of this pandemic, many managers and their teams had to make an overnight switch to remote work. This has certainly posed a lot of unforeseen challenges before them. How would you advise these managers to keep themselves motivated in these difficult times?
I would say just simplify. What I've noticed over the past 2 months is that managers are really overcomplicating the transition process from physical to virtual. And, they're coming to me and just asking, what tools do I need? And, how often do I need to have a retreat? And what they're doing is reading these best practices guides that they're seeing from fully distributed companies that have been doing this for years and years and years. And they're saying, oh, okay, that's what I need to do. And that's not the case at all. Right now, we're seeing Maslow's hierarchy of needs in action right now. People are not concerned about when their next retreat is going to be or what software they're using. They're worried about if they're going to be able to buy groceries or not, and if their family is safe or not. I mean, we are very, very basic levels of needs right now, and managers should feel comfortable in just simplifying the process and not focusing on this massive change management process, but just focus on your people. What do you need? What do they need? Do they feel connected to each other? Do they connected to you? Do they feel secure in their job? And just use that as a benchmark for right now, and then the rest will come. The change management process, it does take time and attention, and that's not something that we have in an emergency situation. So just focus on the very, very basics for now, and then the rest will come later.
I think that's a very interesting point that you mentioned there. At PeopleBox, we are essentially a manager success platform, and all our efforts are directed towards empowering the managers. So, we speak with managers on a regular basis, and a common challenge that many of them face today is employee motivation. So, what can these managers do to ensure their team's emotional and mental well-being, and keep them motivated? Because that's the biggest challenge probably that they face today.
Yeah, well, this is a very a big and complex problem, because if we in an office environment have trained our workers to be dependent on each other for motivation or be dependent on us for motivation, then we're going to see a problem as they go into a location independent environment, because they're independent. They're completely on their own. And so if they have been relying on extrinsic motivation in order to promote productivity, then it's going to be a big complicated transition. So the best thing that we can do, hindsight is 50-50. We wish that we had been better about promoting autonomy in the past, but if we haven't already, we can start right now. And that is just really empowering our employees to be self-managers. What do they need in order to have intrinsic motivation and get the work done themselves? And that's asking tough questions like, when do I feel the most motivated and when do I feel the least motivated? When do I get distracted and how can I overcome that? What are my highest priorities for the day? And so really taking the time as a manager to take your hands off of control and say, well, what do you think? Instead of you saying, well, obviously your top 3 priorities for the day are this, it's really giving the ball back to them and saying, well, what do you think your highest priorities for the day? And really continually supporting them and nurturing them and mentoring them to manage themselves.
Yeah, that brings me to another interesting question. That, like you mentioned, that it's important for managers to ask their employees that what is it that's working for them, not working for them. So we are a big believers of one-on-one meetings. And so what would be your thoughts on the importance of one-on-one meetings during these testing times?
So a very, very common question that I get from most managers is, well, how do I know that my people are working? How do I know, how they're feeling? Like I can't see them, sitting at their desk and their hands are on their head and they're stressed. I can't see that. I can't see when they're stressed. I don't know when to help. And so constant and consistent and empathetic communication is how we build those relationships in a virtual environment. We don't have contextual clues or nonverbal communication to fill in the gaps for us. And so we have to be much, much more open and vulnerable than we are previously used to. It feels very open and awkward, but it's not. What I always say is that in remote work, over communication is just communication. And so you need to take the time to meet with every single one of your team members and say, how are you doing? What are the blocks that you're running into? How can I help you? I've noticed, this weakness in your performance. How do you think that you can improve that? Again, equipping them to be a self-manager. So all of those things are really, really important to have opportunities for that communication in a regular basis, because you don't just bump into each other in the hallways like you used to, and you don't just pass them at their cubicle and say, hey, good job on that report. Like those things aren't happening anymore. So instead of quantity of interaction, we need to substitute it with quality of interaction, and that means scheduling those one-on-one meetings like you're talking about and really having a meaningful, empathetic conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point. And you also mentioned something about over communication here. So a lot of things that we read, I mean, a lot of things in these blogs and these articles, a lot of times they're talking about over communication. So what does that really imply in terms of remote work, and does that really hold true?
It absolutely does. And it feels like over communication. And what it is, like I said, in remote work, over communication is just communication. So it's a new benchmark, because it feels like you are just talking all the time in comparison to what you were doing in the office. In the office, there's kind of a subliminal message or maybe not so subliminal, maybe it's very, very clear, like sit down, be quiet, get your work done, right? Like if you're talking too much, you're being a distraction to other people, or you are not productive, or something like that. So you're taught to just be productive. But for a lot of people, that means you just sit down and shop online, or you're thinking about work or something, but you're not actually being productive. So in remote work, we do a different way of measuring productivity, that we measure based on results. So we're measuring your output instead of your activity.
Hmm.
And so your job in this new style of communication is to say what you need, say what you're doing. Again, we don't have those contextual clues, and so we can't fill in the gaps. You have to fill in the gaps with words. And so it feels very, very awkward at first, but it's not. It's just the new baseline of what you need. So much more consistent, much more transparent, and much more elaborate of communication than you're used to. So instead of saying good job, like if somebody hands you a report and you say good job, and especially if you type it, right, like good job,
Yeah.
that could mean any number of things on the end of of the person that just submitted the report. Like, good job, was that sarcastic? Are they mad at me? Or like, did they really think it was a good job? Or maybe they're disappointed, or what does that mean? You have to tell them what it means. So good job on this report. I really appreciated the graphics that you put in on page 13. I know that that was above and beyond. So congratulations. I was really impressed. I'm looking forward to working with you on the next one. Like, you have to say it. And so, yes, it takes a little bit more time and intention and empathy, but this is the new style of communication in virtual environments.
Yeah, I think, that also probably would mean that managers should have frequent one-on-ones. So probably if they were having, say, once in a month, they were meeting their employees, probably now they should meet once a week. And these meetings could even go longer. So they should be prepared for that as well, right?
Absolutely. Personally, as a manager, I meet with my teams, each member of my team, a long, at least 1 hour, one-on-one with just them, setting big objectives once a month. And then we do weekly check-ins as a group, and we do daily check-ins um, asynchronously, so they're written, but we do those every day. And that works really well in our team and for our team size. But the only word of caution that I would give is to not use one-on-ones as a method of micromanagement, that you have to check in with me so that I know what you're doing. Make sure that it's coming from a place of support and empathy, and don't have a meeting if they don't need one. Let them lead that and say, I'm here if you need me. We have a scheduled time every week, but if they say, no, I'm good, then they're good, and trust them and let them do that. Because another problem in virtual work, because you do have to communicate so much, it's very easy to fall into the trap of too much communication. And then all of a sudden your entire day is just meeting after meeting after meeting, and you'd have no time to actually get work done. So be careful about quality versus quantity. Make sure that the time that you spend together is very comprehensive, that you're coming prepared with an agenda, you meet all of the points on the agenda, and then you follow up asynchronously, and then let it be, and don't be afraid to wait another week to talk to them again, and just let them get their work done.
I think that's really great advice, Laurel. So we've talked a lot about what managers should do, but I think there are some don'ts as well that managers should probably stay away from, especially when they're managing remotely and when they're managing a newly remote team. So, what
Mhm.
according to you are those don'ts that the big no-nos that they should not definitely go towards?
Yes. So micromanagement is one, kind of like we've been talking about. It's very easy to fall into the trap of micromanagement. If you're coming from an office environment in which you've been watching people all day and that's how you know that they're working, it's very easy to translate that into a virtual experience where you say, I need you to check in with me all the time so that I know what you're doing, or to put a camera on them, turn your webcam on so that I can see that you're working. And that's a dangerous situation. It's an invasion of privacy, and it is really communicating that you don't trust your employees to do their work. And so it deteriorates the culture of your company very, very, very quickly. I mean, just yesterday, I had a call with a large organization, and I asked them, what they were doing about this right now, and they said, "Oh, we are requiring that all of the employees call their manager every 30 minutes and report on what they've been doing for the past 30 minutes." And that's ridiculous. That's not an efficient use of time for the management or for the workforce. So again, be trustworthy, give people their tasks, make sure that they know what they're doing for the day, and then just let them go. Um, and you'll be very impressed. I mean, we hire humans. We hire very capable, smart, trustworthy people, and now this gives them a greater chance to show that that's exactly who they are. So don't micromanage. Be very, very careful of that, and just let people manage themselves. But then on the other side of that is, don't isolate them either. Some managers take this to an extreme, and they say, "Great, okay, well, I'm just going to send a to-do list to all of my employees at the beginning of the week, and then I'll see them again the next Monday, and I'll give them another to-do list." And that's not true leadership either. That's maybe delegation and that's assignments, but that's not leadership. So make sure that you stay accessible to your employees through that time of autonomy, and be checking in on them and be supporting them and encouraging them, and offering assistance and providing feedback and giving them updates, showing the example of what it means to be transparent, right? So I just completed this assignment, I'm feeling really good about it, about to ship it to the client, good work team, or things, just little things like that go a long way in keeping your team connected in a virtual environment.
Yeah, correct. That's really interesting. Uh, so on a lighter note, I actually read one of your LinkedIn posts, which said that if I die from this coronavirus chaos, please let my tombstone read, skills are the key to remote work and remote work success, and not tools. Let's talk about that a little. So what I would be really interested to know, what are those must-have skills to make remote work a success, and probably how and what kind of tools should a manager look for to complement that whole process.
Yeah. So that question, that post came from, it was like week 2 or 3 of coronavirus chaos, as I now lovingly call it, which, as you can imagine, on the end of remote work, thought leaders and consultants was an extremely busy time. There was no sleeping happening, no eating. It was just working, working, working. It was just insanity. And but especially at that time, everybody was asking me, what tools do I need? What tools do I need? What tools do I need? And I was just getting so tired of repeating myself and saying, look, a paintbrush is a tool, but depending on how you are trained to use it, you're going to get very different results. Same thing with our software. As leaders, we cannot add new apps and new software, even as cool as they are. I mean, there are some really cool softwares out there, but we cannot add them into our lives and then into our team dynamics and expect them to do our job for us. We are still managers, we are still leaders, and we have to use the tools to enhance our job performance, not substitute for it. And so what I think the core of that is, how do we need to be better leaders, and what do we need to be teaching our workers to do in order to be more effective in their job performance as well, so that we can both thrive in this new virtual environment. And that boils down to soft skills, what we're doing as individuals to be better in in our self-management. And what those are things like effective communication, like we've been talking about, intrinsic motivation, also like we've been talking about, critical thinking. Are you able to identify, analyze, and solve a problem on your own without somebody sitting right next to you to ask questions and bounce ideas off of? Are you able to exercise empathy and imagine, how is somebody going to receive the message that I'm about to send? Could it be misinterpreted? If not, I might need to change some wording around. Flexibility is a really big one. Can we adapt to new scenarios and new changes? Like we're seeing on an economic level right now. We're seeing that the businesses that are able to be flexible and adopt virtual work at scale are doing much, much, much better in business continuity and economic health, as opposed to the businesses that can't. And if they weren't willing to adopt and adapt, then they had to close their doors. I mean, we're seeing this, and that's the same thing with your employees as well. The future of work is a fast pace, and if you can teach your employees to be more flexible, that they will continue to grow and develop. So yeah, soft skills like that are really the root and the core of success in a virtual environment. And so the more that we can nurture those soft skills, the more that they will be prepared for the future of work, period. Whether that's going back to the office, whether that is staying in a home environment, maybe that's more of a mobile office and they're traveling more often, or whatever comes next, whatever the next business trend is after remote work, they will be more prepared across the board.
Okay. Just a quick word about synchronous and asynchronous communication. Asynchronous is really something that is highly recommended, especially in a remote work setup. So just if you could just quickly just take us through that, and how can managers use that as a tool to manage effectively.
Yeah, so a common question that I'm getting recently is what is the new normal, right? What does the future of work look like? And asynchronous communication is always part of my answer because the goal of remote work advocates like me is not necessarily that the entire world goes remote, because that is hypocritical, right? If we say that one location is better than another location, then that defeats the entire purpose, where we are saying no, we don't have to be in a location in order to do the best work. So our platform is more accurately that location is irrelevant, that we don't care where people are working, we don't care if they're on site, we don't care if they're off site. Like, work is something that you do, not a place that you go, and so it doesn't matter where you are. And so the future of work and the new normal is, we hope, not really part of the conversation about where you're working. We don't care if it's home or co-working or office. We care about how work is happening. And so what we anticipate the new normal will be is elements of remote working being integrated into work regardless of location. And asynchronous communication is one of those things, because it accommodates different locations, different time zones, different cultures, it accommodates neurodiversity, other types of diversity. Like, it just is more inclusive of a work style. And so asynchronous communication is where you can accomplish the same results, have the exact same conversation that you would in a face-to-face environment, but just broken up into different times. So classic example is, instead of having a phone call, you send an email so that they can receive it on their time and you send it on your time. So the advice there to managers is that if they um, be wise about how you're using what channel. So a great example from a friend of mine at Evernote, he says that you would never send an email to the fire department if your house is on fire. So same rings true for managers. Like, think about how you are using each channel of communication. If you're just trying to send information for searchability, use email. If you want something to be waiting in their inbox and easy to see in the morning, probably use Slack. If you're having an emotionally charged conversation or providing some sensitive feedback, you definitely want that to be synchronous, so that it's received more easily and you have more emotional context. So that would be best done in a video call. But then even there's some tasks that some teams like to only do in person, and reserve those for your retreat, or ask your team members to come to headquarters office once a month or something like that. That can be things like onboarding or team development or ideation and brainstorming or things like that. So yeah, just utilize asynchronous communication as a quicker, easier way to communicate, as opposed to scheduling a meeting every single time you need to talk to somebody.
Okay, so in one of your interviews, you had mentioned that companies that for companies to deliver remote work experiences, better remote work experiences, they should probably look at maybe experimenting working remotely for a week or more, and then so that they can empathize better with the remote workers. Uh, Now that the world is going through this global work from home experiment, and it's just sparked on its own, do you see remote work becoming the new reality once the world reopens? And also, if a few organizations decide to go ahead with it, how can they make it a more sustainable model of working?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because there is a big difference between allowing remote work and truly optimizing remote work. And that's the mistake that a lot of businesses are making right now, is that they've sent everybody home, and now it's been a few weeks and they said, "Oh, that wasn't as hard as I thought. Great, I guess we're remote friendly now." And we're done. And that's not accurate at all. And it's could result in some very major problems in the future, major as in compliance breaches and legal infractions. Like, I mean, very, very serious problems. So yes, there's a difference between just allowing people to do their work in a different place and really functioning and collaborating as a distributed team. So I recommend that as at a minimum, that organizations and leaders ensure that they have a policy in place that really sets expectations for performance in this new work model. They also get training that is specific to remote work, both for management and for workforce, because that's the cruel irony of remote work change management, is that you don't know what you don't know. And so that's why everybody's right now is feeling like, oh, okay, it's not that bad. Yeah, we could do this long term. But then, 3 years down the road, when somebody sues you for an OSHA, like an Occupational Safety and Health Administration regulation infraction, then they say, oh, I didn't even think about that. Like, oh no, and now I've broken the law and I owe this person millions of dollars. Oh no, like it's true. You just don't think about those things until you think about them. So that's the benefit of working with a consultant and getting training, is that they've been down this road before. They know what is further down the path. They do know what you don't know. And so they can help you through that transition. So training, consulting would be very, very, very recommended. Um, and then, yeah, evaluation. So it is a critical part of our change management process when we are advising a company to conduct that trial and then evaluate what went well, what didn't go well. And so do that as a team. I mean, don't just assume that you're doing it right and doing it correctly. Don't be afraid of that self-assessment to say what is going well, what's not going well, how can we simplify, how can we strengthen, really continually evaluate, because remote work has been happening for about 50 years at this point. But in the terms of business in general, that is very, very young. We have a lot to learn. And so the more that we continue to evaluate and analyze, the more opportunity we have to innovate and to develop new best practices. And now that's the responsibility of every leader and every manager as we go to be thinking of the new best ideas in which to manage their teams. The guides that you read out there about best practices of remote work, that's what worked best for their team. But remote work is not one size fits all. So figure out and be brave enough to figure out what works best for your team uniquely.
Yeah, I think, that brings me to my last question. Uh, Finally, I would, if you had to sum up the top three tips for managers to lead the remote teams successfully, would be those top three tips?
Good question. I have so many. I would say number one, focus on the soft skills and really encourage self-management by training your workers how to manage themselves. That's going to make or break your entire success as a leader. So number one, focus on that. Number two, develop a culture of trust. This allows for that results-based tracking that we talked about, taking your hands off, letting go of micromanagement, and really empowering the workers to do the work themselves, but not just teaching them how to, but actually letting them, being a trusting leader. And then third would be to simplify and have fun. This is a really exciting and empowering work model, and it can benefit the business in so many ways. I mean, average savings from converting a role from physical to virtual is between $11,000 and $20,000 US dollars, and that's per worker per year. I mean, massive, massive savings can be tapped into if we optimize this as a work model. And so, yes, don't think of this as something that you were forced into and get frustrated that it's not working. Be flexible and be excited. This is new. This is exciting. How can we use this to strengthen our team? Even if you do go back to the office, the exercise of being adaptable and problem solving together as a team will make you that much stronger regardless of your location in the future. So have an open mindset and be excited about the opportunity to try something new, and that will make a big difference in your long-term results.
That's so well said, Laurel. And that is some really great actionable advice. I'm sure many managers would find this conversation really insightful. And if our audience wants to learn more about you and the work that you're doing, how you're helping organizations and managers across the world and the leaders, get more advice from you, where can they find you?
LinkedIn is the best place. So just my name, Laurel Farrer. I'm the only one. I'm easy to find. So that's the best place. I'm also on Twitter, or you can always visit our website, which is distributeconsulting.com.
Okay. Thank you so much for being here, Laurel, today. And it was a pleasure speaking with you and discussing these timely and important issues. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you for having me. It was a great conversation.